The government is looking into big tech, essentially whether companies like Facebook, Google, and Apple are too big. Is Apple too big?
No, I don't think so.
So you're saying you're not a monopoly?
We are not a monopoly.
We are not a monopoly.
After almost 3 years, Apple has finally surrendered and admitted complete and utter defeat against the EU over their antitrust lawsuits. Yes, it has already been confirmed that iOS 17.4 will be the first major update that'll completely rewrite everything we knew about the App Store in the EU, including allowing third-party app stores, sideloading, and more. But the craziest part is that some incredibly exciting App Store changes are happening worldwide, and sadly for Apple, this first major loss is just the beginning. But before I explain what I mean, as well as going through and explaining each and every new change, I first want to walk you through the history of this major antitrust battle. All the way back in 2013, the European Union accused Ireland of giving Apple massive tax breaks, which allowed Apple to save billions of dollars in taxes. And after an over 3-year battle, they declared that Apple must repay $14.5 billion in back taxes, and in 2018, they finally finished paying $15.3 billion in taxes to Ireland. However, in July of 2020, Apple was able to get the EU General Court to completely overturn the decision, ruling against the European Commission. Now, I don't know how this is gonna end, but one thing's for sure, Apple really pissed off the EU Antitrust Commission. In the meantime, Tim Sweeney over at Epic Games decided to craft a master plan to add even more fuel to the antitrust fire. And less than 1 month later, Epic Games introduced a brand new direct payment option within their viral game Fortnite to completely avoid Apple's 30% App Store commission system. And only a couple of hours later, Apple banned Fortnite off of the App Store, and banned it remains to this day. Immediately after the ban, Fortnite launched a massive pre-planned campaign against Apple dubbed Free Fortnite, with a short video that completely mocked Apple's famous 1984 ad, showing Epic Games fighting back against Apple and defying their App Store monopoly, hoping to win support from consumers to free Fortnite and get it back on the App Store. Epic Games subsequently launched a lawsuit against Apple, costing them hundreds of millions of dollars in sales, and in April of last year, Apple declared victory. However, that's not the end of the story, because in February of 2021, Epic Games filed an EU antitrust complaint against Apple, joining other companies who already filed complaints, and Spotify joined in on the fun in April of 2021, accusing Apple of App Store antitrust violations. So it looks like even though Epic Games lost their direct lawsuit, they were actually successful in their attempt to spark a trend of companies filing complaints against Apple, leading us to where we are today. And as we all know, in October of 2022, Apple lost a major court case against the European Commission, which outlined a plan to force all tech companies to use a single charging port, USBC, which was literally meant to target Apple's Lightning port, because every other tech company was already using USB-C. And later that month, Apple admitted defeat and said that they would comply with the European Union, and less than a year later, we have the iPhone 15 with a USB-C port, as well as other products like the USB-C AirPods Pro. But the biggest threat of all came with the brand new Digital Markets Act in the EU, which passed into law in November of 2022, forcing Apple to allow other app stores, sideloading, and iMessage interoperability, forcing Apple to get to work on those new features. And now, finally, on January 25th, 2024, Apple has officially surrendered and announced a massive list of changes to iOS, Safari, and the App Store in the European Union, starting with iOS 17.4. So with that said, let's get into the juicy details. First of all, Apple had to create more than 600 brand new APIs to support all of these changes, as well as some sneaky ones that Apple put in to make it more difficult for third-party apps to make it on the iOS platform. Starting from the top, Apple created new frameworks and APIs for creating alternative app marketplaces, APIs for distributing those apps to users, new frameworks and APIs for creating alternative browser engines, and an additional interoperability request form for any additional requests. They even created new APIs enabling developers to use Apple's NFC chip technology in their banking and wallet apps to basically replace Apple Pay as the default for the first time, but of course only in the EU area. On top of that, they finally allowed users to set a third-party web browser as their default, including the support for full web browser engines without using WebKit. They also added new options for payment service providers, processing payments via linkout, and much more. So it looks like iPhone users in the EU are gonna have the most free iOS ecosystem we've ever seen. But most interesting of all, Apple is now allowing game streaming apps in the App Store like Xbox Cloud Gaming and Nvidia GeForce Now, and guess what? These changes are coming to iOS users around the world, not just in the EU. And it seems like this is a direct result of all of the backlash, complaints, and lawsuits that Apple's been going through, which is bad news for Apple because if they give people just a little bit of slack, people are gonna be asking for more. But by far the biggest deal is that Apple officially reduced their App Store commissions from up to 30% down to only 10 to 17% in the EU, as well as an additional 3% fee for those who want to continue using Apple's App Store payment processing system. So right about now, developers in the EU are getting very excited because of these lower commissions, and the rest of the world is subsequently getting very jealous, which makes me think Apple might eventually be forced to bring these changes to more and more countries over the coming years as more lawsuits spark up. So this is only the beginning of the war for Apple. But for the time being, Apple released a statement explaining why they won't bring these major iOS changes to the rest of the world. Money, of course. Just kidding. Apple says they really want to protect their users from malware, fraud, and scam risks. Oh, thank you, Apple. How sweet. So it sounds like Apple has completely surrendered to the EU, but no. They're actually fighting back in some pretty sneaky ways using certain loopholes to protect their profits. First of all, Apple has already warned that the user experience won't be as good if you end up purchasing apps through third-party app stores. Restrictions on in-app purchases and screen time, family purchase sharing for apps and subscriptions, ask to buy, universal purchase, and more features will simply not be supported anymore. And Apple will of course no longer support users with refunds, purchase history, subscription management and cancellation, violations of user data privacy, abuse, fraud, and manipulations if you choose to download from third-party app stores. So Apple is basically saying, best of luck, you're on your own. But Apple is really going hard after the large developers like Epic Games who want to release their own Epic Games Store on iOS. Apple says that all third-party app marketplace creators must provide Apple a standby letter of credit from an A-rated financial institution of 1 million euros prior to receiving permission to release their third-party app store. This comes as a huge surprise and basically creates a massive barrier of entry and huge pain for anyone thinking of creating their own app store. But wait, it gets worse. Apple's gonna annoy users with constant pop-ups warning them that they're downloading apps from alternative app stores or using alternative payment systems. There's also gonna be in-app disclosure pop-ups warning users that they're no longer transacting with Apple. But on the developer side, Apple's introducing new app review processes to verify that developers are accurately communicating information about transactions that use alternative payment processors, making it even more difficult to get apps approved. But the absolutely worst of it all is that Apple is introducing a brand new core technology fee that will charge developers 50 cents for every single app install that users make over a 1 million install threshold, within their new third-party app stores. And guess what? That also includes installations of the actual app store itself before downloading any actual apps within that app store. So this means that third-party app stores get double screwed, and developers within those app stores also get screwed because that 50-cent fee applies to all app downloads over 1 million, including free apps. So let's say theoretically 2 million people download the free game Fortnite within the new Epic Games Store. That actually comes out to 4 million downloads, 2 for the App Store itself and 2 for the game. That means that Epic Games is now over the 1 million threshold by 3 million downloads, meaning they would have to pay Apple 50 cents each per download, totaling $1.5 million in fees going straight to Apple for a free game. So Epic Games better hope that those 2 million people that downloaded Fortnite for free spend at least $1.5 million on in-app purchases, or else they're losing money, potentially putting them in an even worse situation than they were before with Apple's 30% commissions. And honestly, it's gonna make more sense for many free app and game developers to stick with Apple's App Store and the new lowered 20% commission structure, and that is exactly why Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney went to Twitter to call Apple's announcement a hot garbage horror show. But one thing's for sure, app sideloading looks like it won't be anything like how it works on macOS, where you can go online and download third-party apps for free. Apple's gonna keep iOS locked down, forcing developers to continue paying Apple one way or another. So with that said, it's pretty clear that this is only the beginning of Apple's antitrust war. But that's enough for today's episode. So if you enjoyed it, click that circle button to subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
You're saying you're not a monopoly.
We are not a monopoly.
We are not a monopoly. We are not a monopoly.